From flooding to growth in Mount Pleasant to the latest in politics, the Post and Courier's Brian Hicks sits down with me one-on-one for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Well, Brian, it is so good to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
I appreciate this.
Always good to talk to you.
Likewise, I know that you've been busy, I've been busy, and I know that I was trying to get you back in August, and I know at the time you still are. You're working on your new book. What is that new book?
It's sort of a biography of Judge Waring,
Yes.
and also it's a history of Charleston, pretty much from Reconstruction up until the 1950s, and telling the story of how Briggs versus Elliott became Brown versus Board of Education and all that. But it's a really interesting trip through some little-known Charleston history, including the exposition that we had here in 1901, 1902, and things like that. And of course, Waring's entire life story.
That's right. And you were telling me the story about how September P. Clark was a part of...
She was involved in early NAACP. Their first petition drive was to allow for the state to hire black teachers for the black schools. They had segregated schools then, of course. And the NAACP said, you know, this is not fair. You should be able to hire black teachers. And they went on a petition drive trying to get 10,000 signatures in downtown Charleston to do this just in the county.
Right.
And one of the people they recruited was a young teacher at Avery High School named Septima Clark. At that point, Septima Poinsett. This was before she got married. And they got their 10,000 signatures, and they actually got the legislation passed the next year.
Wow.
And that's just, you know, some of the stuff that's going on as Waring is growing up and getting older in there, and a lot of interesting tales of very little written about period in Charleston history.
Why Judge Waring? Why now?
He's always been a hero of mine, but I just don't think that enough people know about him and what he did and his role in basically sparking the civil rights movement. Of course, he wasn't the only one, but the way they used his dissent to write Brown versus Board of Education. He basically wrote Brown versus Board of Education, and they were all his arguments. They wouldn't use them, of course, because they thought the South would revolt because everybody hated Judge Waring at the time. But you can see things are changing. We have a statue to him now. They changed the name of the courthouse. Right. And this book about the judge that I first thought of doing 10 years ago, I decided now's the time.
Yeah. Speaking of time, there's so much going on in Charleston.
I know.
Gosh. I mean, if you could put flooding, politics, and even what's going on in Washington into one column, what would that headline be?
I probably couldn't say it out loud. We couldn't print it in the paper. I saw somebody, I think it's Thomas Legree on Jones Island, on Facebook this weekend.
Right.
We had the story from Tony Bartleman about algae, and the headline was scum. And Thomas said that he picked it up because he thought we were writing about the political scandal in Columbia.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't know. It's a mess everywhere, and I don't know. Flooding, of course, is dominating us down here, but we're going to have a lot of other things going on too, I'm afraid. But the $2 billion figure this week was the big thing, of course, and really only $1 billion of that Charleston's responsible for.
Oh.
The other trick that I haven't written about yet is how you get the state and everybody else to pay the money they need to pay for raising roads and doing things like that, improving our bridges. It's a problem that's not going away anytime soon.
And you wrote an interesting headline. Everyone's going to get soaked before Charleston stops flooding.
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of people, I saw as soon as that figure came out, everybody was talking about, let's use the 526 money, which cannot happen.
Right.
Which, I mean, besides the fact that the infrastructure bank, they won't even give us the money for the road that they promised. They're certainly not going to give it to us for something else. If you're not doing this project, you go to the back of the line, that money goes back in the pool. We can't just have that. And the other thing that no one's paid any attention to is that 526 is a county project. It's not the city's money. If we did get that money, it would go to the county. Do you think they're going to give that money to the city?
And what is the relationship between council and city right now?
I think it's okay. I mean, I don't think that there's, I don't think they like them enough they're going to hand them $400 million. But they get along pretty good, and they've been working well together. When they have similar purposes and same goals, like 526.
Right.
But they haven't really had any spats lately. I'm surprised.
You talk about politics, obviously, as you know, Nancy Mace is in the House District 99, and I think she's going to go up against Mark Smith, who's going to be departing Mount Pleasant Town Council, and a couple other people. There's speculation that Josh Whitley might get in there, and another attorney, Sean, I can't remember Sean's name, Sean Pinkston. What would that race be like in your mind?
That is going to be comedic gold to mine, I think, because Josh is always entertaining, and Nancy says what she thinks.
Right.
I don't know. I wouldn't know who to put my money on in that race, or who would win. What I find interesting is half the time you can't get people to run for a state house seat, and now this is like an open congressional seat. Like, you know, I don't know. I guess over on Daniel Island they got more time
And money, apparently.
Apparently.
Yeah. And let me move over to Congress, because obviously it's now Katie Ayrton versus Congressman Mark Sanford. And then on the Democratic side, you have Joe Cunningham. And I believe Dimitri Turney, I'm not sure, he might jump in the race as a second party Democratic candidate. But who's going to come out on top in your mind?
I don't know. That's a really interesting question.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard to bet against Mark Sanford because I don't think he's ever lost an election.
No.
But what happened is when he came so close to losing in the Republican primary last year,
Right.
it was sort of like putting blood in the water, and you knew people were going to come gunning for him. And I think that's why you're seeing Arrington get in the race,
Right.
and some other people. And the first district is a fairly safe Republican district.
Okay.
So, I mean, you would think whoever wins the Republican primary is going to take the seat. But because of all the reaction and the backlash about Trump,
Right.
you never know. I mean, in the 5th district up there that Ralph Norman won
Right.
over the summer,
Right.
Democrat came within a couple of points of winning that seat. And the 1st district, which most of Charleston's
Right.
in, is probably even a more moderate district than the 5th. The 5th used to be a Democratic seat. They reapportioned it out, so
Oh.
the Republicans took it just a few years ago.
Okay.
So it's not as bad as like the 2nd or 3rd district or 4th district,
Right.
which are completely gerrymandered to favor the Republicans. But the 1st district is a little more balanced. At least Charleston County in the 1st district is
Right.
about 50-50. Berkeley County just throws it over the Republicans.
Right.
So if anybody can beat Sanford in the primary, they've probably got a good chance. And if Sanford goes into the general, he's probably got a good chance, but you never can tell with the way, you know, these politics are going, the way
Yeah.
these races are running nowadays.
I got to take you to Myrtle Beach, because you said this, you wrote this column, and I love this headline. It says this: "Is free speech really free when the city can bill you?" Quote, unquote. And there's a question mark obviously behind bill you. And I know that the Myrtle Beach City Council wants to charge protesters now for demonstrations if they hire police officers.
Yeah.
Talk to me more about that.
Well, it's clearly it's a reaction to Charlottesville, and it's also sort of putting a chilling effect on free speech in that they're almost putting up a sign saying protesters don't come here. They don't want to fool with you. You're going to have to, you know, sign and agree to pay these police officers. And, you know, who says protesters have that kind of money? No, not many people do. I mean, if you're paying 2 police officers a couple hours overtime and there's 25 or 30 of you, maybe everybody chips in a couple of bucks and you can pay their salary. But if a protest turns into something major and they call in, extra police officers and it takes all day, I mean, just the chances to put a person on the hook for that is gonna have a chilling effect. And I just don't think you can do that. I talked to Charleston and Columbia people.
Oh, good.
And they said, this has never come up. We would never do that. That's the price of doing business as a city. You let people come in and they say their piece. What I didn't write in the column was that there's some concerns, some people expressed to me, and we'll see how it plays out, is that this might be some kind of way to slow down the Black Bike Week that has caused the problems. And we'll see what happens with that.
Gosh. There's another issue that I want to talk to you about, and this is the headline from the Post and Courier, and this reads, Charleston County offers $33 million to settle Navy hospital claims. What does that $33 million tell you, Brian?
That tells me that some sitting county councilmen may lose their seats. People are mad about this.
Right.
It's a crazy issue, and if it's this week,
Right.
they're supposed to ask. And I don't understand the people who are the developers who own the building right now. They're getting 25 years worth of rent from the county up front for nothing, and they're not sure they're going to accept that. I wouldn't have offered them that much. I mean, the county says the building was not built to specifications. It wasn't the way they wanted it.
Right.
And I'm not sure they should have made the offer, and I think some people at the county really hope that people don't accept, so they can go to court and pay them less.
Okay.
And they better hope that they pay less, because all I hear from is people who say they're giving $33 million to who? And I don't know if it was a bad contract or what, but everybody I've talked to at the county says that officials up that way were just so desperate to revitalize that area. It's the food desert.
Right.
There's all this stuff going on. That building's been sitting there empty for decades. And they were so desperate to revitalize that area and do something good for it that maybe they jumped into a deal with some people they shouldn't have been dealing with, because they certainly haven't been able to get along and have different ideas of what building standards should be. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I've been watching, and I haven't written about it because I want to see what happens Thursday.
Yeah. Because I interviewed Teddy probably just this morning about that, and they want to wait until Thursday to find out more about this issue. Another issue that's going on right now is the debate about Confederate monuments. And obviously you had City of Charleston Mayor John Teckleburg saying, hey, we can add markers to these monuments, but we can't really take them down. And then I just interviewed State Representative Wendell Gilliard just the other day, and he has the idea of bringing them down if it has to be. And then, of course, Rocky D on the other side.
What did Rocky D say?
He basically said, hey, it'll cost these governments a lot of money to take them down, and I'm sure the insurance company will have to fit the bill. Where are we with the debate over Confederate monuments, that is?
Where are we? The State Heritage Act is really the big stumbling block. The city can't do anything. They can't take down, if they wanted to take down the John C. Calhoun Monument, they couldn't by state law.
Right.
And unfortunately, to change the Heritage Act the way it's written, they have to have like a 2/3 vote of the legislature to change it. I mean, that's why there's still a Confederate battle flag in Summerall Chapel at the Citadel. The Citadel can't even move their own flag because of this thing. And there's actually some question, this idea, which I like, that Mayor Tecklenburg said about adding context to these monuments. And I read some of the context that they're talking about, and it's pretty frank. And I think that'd be a good idea, but I'm not even sure the Heritage Act will allow them to put markers on their own monuments. There's some people who could fight that and argue that that's changing the monument. Because there's a town in somewhere northwest of Columbia, between Columbia and Greenville. It may be Greenwood, where they're trying to change a World War I monument.
Okay.
Where they had two separate. They want to add black soldiers killed in World War I to this monument, and it's like the Heritage Act. You can't add names to it. You can't change. You can't touch a monument in any way. It's something like that. I'm not sure of the details, but it's something that doesn't even have anything to do with the Civil War, and it's just monuments. You can't do them. It's like, this is the town, I think it's Greenwood. It's their monument, and they can't even do what they want to do. So the city can't really do much of anything.
Wow.
They can stick up some more if they want.
Okay.
But they can't take anything down. And I don't know how, I sort of like putting them in context, and people should know what these monuments mean, what they stand for. The Calhoun Monument's a little different than most of them. A lot of these statues went up, during the Jim Crow era.
Okay.
And stuff like that. And in fact, somebody was making a buck on this, because a lot of these are kind of cookie cutter statues. They're all the same thing, and people go around selling them.
Okay.
But the Calhoun Monument, they had started that like in the 1850s, well before the war. And I don't know if they started on it, they didn't get started on construction or what, but that thing was a 30 or 40 year thing. And so it's a little different than some of these other ones. Not that it's any better, but yeah, I don't know that any way you're going to legally take down these statues in South Carolina.
Wow. Maybe I move from downtown Charleston to Mount Pleasant. When you drive across the bridge and stop over the town hall, what do you think about the future of Mount Pleasant in your mind?
I think that in a couple of few months, after the November election,
Right.
it's going to look a lot like Somerville has for the past couple of years, with the fighting in the city government.
Right.
I don't know. I think that there is too much growth over there. Clearly, there's too much growth everywhere. Of course, the opposite of that, some people will tell you, and this is from the school of Joe Riley, that if a city's not growing, it's dying. Well, Mount Pleasant's not in any danger of dying, that's for sure. But there are people worried about growth and overdevelopment over there, and I think the issues that Mount Pleasant needs to be worried about are things like affordable housing. If you go over there now, you drive around Mount Pleasant at rush hour, which isn't pleasant, but they have done such a job on their roads that it's now, believe it or not, a lot easier to get around Mount Pleasant than it is West Ashley. And so they're doing some things right over there. And of course, the county did a lot of that, Johnny Dodds Boulevard. But they do things right over there. But they're having a little political problem with people who don't like just how much growth they're seeing. What I see ample opportunities to write columns over there, but they're doing okay. They'll get it figured out.
And just yesterday, I interviewed Johnny Wright, who's running for town council, and he basically talked to me in depth about single member districts, which was shot down just recently. Is there a future for that?
I don't think so. It's kind of arcane, but I just don't think there is the civic involvement, or I don't think enough people care over there about the issue, and it's a hard one to explain to people on a municipal level like that, and especially when the opponents of it couch it in terms of, you're taking away 7 of my votes on council. Well, when you say it that way, it sounds pretty bad. I personally think they'd be better off with single member districts, but if that's not what people want, I don't think they don't have some of the issues that other cities have that might force them to need. Mount Pleasant's all pretty much Mount Pleasant, and it's not like you're going to see a lot of diversity on council there, if you know what I mean. you couldn't draw a majority-minority district in Mount Pleasant,
Okay.
which is the reason that places like Charleston went to single-member districts 40, 50 years ago.
Oh.
And that's not really an issue in Mount Pleasant, so,
Mm.
so it takes some of the urgency out of doing that.
And also on the ballot come November will be a new mayor. We don't know if it's going to be Linda Page or Will Haney.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to speculate. I like them both. Nice people.
Mm.
I talk to them both all the time.
Uh,
And it's going to depend on who gets out their vote. And really, that's the biggest problem over there. Not a lot of folks vote in the municipal elections. I think they had 11% turnout in their last ones.
Wow.
And I know they do this so they won't get lost, but I'm really thinking, this is just off the top of my head, this might be a column for some time. Cities having their elections in off years, and I forget, somebody will have to tell me the reason they do that, but people just don't turn out. More people would vote if you would have it during the presidential election years, or even the gubernatorial elections.
Mm.
But when the only reason to go to the ballot is to vote for one councilman or something, you're just not gonna get much turnout. Even Charleston, you go back and look at some of those election years, and the off years,
Right.
that Mayor Riley was running unopposed.
Right.
Sometimes he won his job with 3,500 votes
Wow.
in a city of, what, 120,000 people?
Right.
Probably 100,000 at that point at least. So, I mean, that's how that turnout is in
Mm.
elections, and Mount Pleasant has chronically been that way.
Wow. Well, Brian Hicks, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Thanks, it's fun to talk.
Likewise. Always good to get your insight on this. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Anytime.